Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with the market recap for October 2nd. It is a Tuesday. Another mixed day in the market. You had the Dow hitting all-time highs. You had the Russell tanking, and a little bit of indecision in the S&P and the Nasdaq. So a little bit of everything today. Quickly before we jump into it, we do have one S&P 500 company reporting tomorrow before the open. Ticker symbol LEN, Lennar Corporation. So we can keep an eye on. Not the world's largest company, but still made it on the S&P 500. Certainly isn't tiny, right? Really not a ton of earnings this week or next. Although we start to get the big banks like J.P. Morgan next week is kind of the unofficial start to earnings season before things really heat up the following week. So we'll be seeing plenty of earnings together over the course of the month of October. Always an exciting time. But that's in the future. Today, where do we find ourselves? Well, a lot of back and forth on the S&P 500. Again, one of those kind of days where it pushed up and then kind of sold off of those highs right underneath that resistance level. So, I mean, it makes sense. They're dojing really 2 days in a row. It's just not ready to break out, but it's not ready to give up. Trend remains intact. So really not a whole lot has changed, just not quite ready to break to the upside just yet. We tested those high points there on the Nasdaq before kind of giving up for the day and selling off, closing closer to the bottom of the day's trading range. But we continue to hold this little mini breakout. Again, whenever we have to struggle at resistance, as traders, we understand that makes sense. We don't have to like it, but we know that it makes sense. If it was just easy to break through resistance and that's all we ever had to do, well, it'd be all right, right? But that's just not how it works. So continue to fight with resistance over on the Nasdaq. The Dow continues to show relative strength, was able to push through that previous swing, which of course with its resistance level and previous all-time high, creating a new all-time high today. Sold off a little bit from the highs, but actually was able to close above that point. So a lot of strength continuing to show over in the Dow Jones right now. I do think everybody would probably agree it's the strongest index. And even if you wouldn't agree with that, you would definitely agree that it is stronger than the Russell, because the Russell, after giving up following the break of support, it's taken a couple of days and it's really ran to the downside, showing a ton of weakness over in the small cap segment of the market. We are approaching that support zone. We have a low back here, we have a low back here. So we are approaching a level of support. We want to monitor that. Maybe that can slow this thing down. But we're seeing a lot of selling, obviously bearish patterns. Things aren't looking all that hunky-dory over in the Russell right now. We'll kind of keep an eye on that general support level. Sometimes it can be helpful to go into a weekly to kind of get a little bit of perspective. We're getting pretty close to that. That's when we look at our weekly chart, boy, that shouldn't break, right? So we want to keep an eye on that. Obviously, we're very extended to the downside right now, but we're showing a ton of weakness over in the Russell currently. We did get a little bit of carryover from yesterday's upward movement in the material sector that continues to kind of rally off of that pretty brutal sell-off that it had last week. I haven't really changed my opinion on it personally. It's breaking support, breaking failing at resistance. But right now we clearly are kind of in that upward swing cycle on the material sector. Wherever you find yourself, whether you're like me and I'm just not interested in jumping in from a bullish point of view, or you are, we have to be mindful of where we overall are, right, in the sector. We do have a lot of overhead, but we are developing a little bit of bullish momentum. And until we see any sort of turnaround, I'll be short-term bullish. But overall, for me, I'm putting a neutral grade on the material sector right now, which means I'm not interested in it. I've lived that way for a while. So energy remains strong. We did kind of come up off of our lows. Nothing really too crazy today over in the energy sector as we continue to kind of hover in this general resistance of this previous resistance area. But we do continue to hold up pretty strong, although a little bit overextended, a little bit of selling today, a little bit of back and forth at least. overall, we still remain pretty bullish, in my opinion, over there. Finance continues to just be gross, for lack of a better term. It's trying to find a little bit of support. We did see some buying off of today's low. It really looked like it was thinking about breaking down even further earlier in the trading day before catching its footing, rallying up a little bit and closing on a positive note. We are very extended to the downside, of course, but we're showing a ton of weakness. This is definitely not an area that I think, us as bulls should be all that excited about currently. But we are starting to maybe develop a general support zone, maybe to get some buyers, probably won't be me, but probably try to get some buyers back in on this thing, at least for the short term. It's just a ton of weakness, a lot of overhead resistance. Not my cup of tea. I'm a simple guy. I like to go with what's strong. If I'm a bull, what's weak without a bear. And if it's confusing to me, I'm not ashamed to say, yeah, let someone else figure that one out. Right? Industrials, of course, Dow had a solid day. Saw a little more upward movement in the industrial sector here today, as that does overall continue to be one of our stronger areas. Of course, as we were doing our work in our watch list, our scanning reports this past week, we saw a ton of interesting bullish setups develop over in the sector. I think late last week into early this week, continue to show upward movement, continue to be pretty strong, in my mind at least, in the industrial sector. Technology did briefly try to break to the upside today, settled in, much like yesterday, broke out, kind of settled back in right at that resistance level. Makes sense. I'm not overly concerned with that, but hey, that resistance is real. Of course, we're seeing that on the Nasdaq, so that, of course, as always makes sense. Tech does pretty much what the Nasdaq does, right? Over in staples, starting to see some money come back into it. Don't love this chart. I have kind of a neutral type of philosophy on this one right now. With I really don't think it should break 53.50. That would quickly make me turn bearish. I'm not really super sold on this support bounce, but we are starting to see some more momentum creep into it, regardless of what my opinion is. Closing above the 50, we've seen it struggle with that for a few days. While maybe not the greatest buy signal ever, is certainly a bullish signal, right? Certainly a positive development. I'll continue to monitor. We do know where support is. We do know where resistance is. And really, until something changes, I think we're going to look at this as one of those sideways. At least that's how I'm going to be looking at the staple sector until it figures out, which means if it's going to bounce off of support and run all the way to resistance, it's probably going to have to do that without me this time. The best of luck to anybody who's doing anything different. Another strong day in utilities, as now we're running into some challenges. We had that big sell-off after the fail of support. We're now working into that old support level, which lines up with that 50-day moving average. We clearly haven't seen any sell signals just yet. Saw some doji yesterday, but that's not a sell signal. That's just a signal of indecision, right? Haven't seen any downward movement or anything like that. I think there should be a challenge area for this sector. As we kind of talked yesterday, we're seeing a lot of individual utility stocks not too far away, and I'm sure some broke through their 50-day moving averages today based off of the movement that we saw. But this is definitely an area that's going to be an important price. It's a great place for a potential selling opportunity price-wise. I know we haven't seen any confirmation or anything like that, but just pure price, breaking down, coming back to the breakdown point, that's a price I'm definitely interested in from a selling point of view. Now, let's just see if we get any signals. I don't want to do that on a day where it's a giant bullish candle. That doesn't seem like the most sensible thing to do to me. But this should be an area to struggle. If it can push back through that, that would certainly be a sign of strength in my mind. I'm not going to bet on it. I always bet on resistance and support, whether or not I'm trading it. Regardless of that, I'm always betting on support resistance for sure. But definitely we're getting, if you were interested in a bearish retracement on the utility sector, and I certainly have some interest in that myself, very happy with where things are kind of developing. Tomorrow's not going to be the day, if there in fact is a day, but I couldn't ask for a better retracement. We're back into resistance. We've definitely seen those sellers get out. I'm very interested in seeing how we respond over the next couple of trading days at this price, because that should be a challenge. Over in healthcare, nothing too crazy to report. Pretty flat day. Closed a little bit down on the day. Nothing substantial, nothing major. We still are in a great trend over there. pretty consistent, really nothing all that exciting to report in the world of healthcare. Really pushed down, carrying off that seller's momentum, failing at resistance yesterday. We're getting pretty darn close to support, which also happened to line up pretty nicely with that 50-day moving average over in the discretionary. That's why we look at support and resistance, right? You never know when it's going to play. You just know that it can play out this way. And certainly we were pushed down pretty heavily off of that resistance level. I'll obviously continue to treat this until it's out of this range as a range bound thing, because that's clearly what it's in over the last few weeks. And I certainly believe that's kind of how you handle a chart that looks like this personally. But we're getting closer to the support side of things, whereas just a couple of days ago, we were closer to the resistance side. So still, in my mind, we remain pretty sideways over there. Unlike utilities that really got a lot of buyers back in, at least short term off of its break, real estate's had a heck of a time doing just that. After having a pretty nice close on Friday of last week, sellers stepped right back in. We're working our way back down towards support, lining up just a little north of that 200-day moving average. This is an easy chart, as long as it's making lower highs and lower lows, as long as it stays below here, I can't buy it. Might not sell it, but I can't buy it, right? But if I do want to buy it, well, hey, if it catches its footing, starts to show upward movement and does break that, that would be a potential buying opportunity. I love charts that look like this because I can either be short in it right now, go short if it breaks support, or go long if it makes a higher level or holds support and then breaks to the upside. I love charts that look like this. Just not here today, unless you're already short off of that retracement. And I don't really think, from a broad point of view, I'm sure there were individual stocks that would have fit nicely. From an ETF point of view, probably, well, for me at least, I don't think there's a great opportunity on the short side. But we're still seeing a lot of bearish characteristics in real estate currently, no doubt about that. As we move to the dollar, we had a little bit of a failed breakout attempt here today, pushed through that 95.50, kind of ran to the upside, kind of closing right there. I don't have really any interest, but I don't know quite what to make. I don't like this candle. We've seen these type of candles before where we try to break out. We start going crazy as everybody jumps in, and then we give it all back before the end of the day, closing right at or below that breakout point. I do think tomorrow's candle will be important. If we can push through, it'll be a break. By default, it will be a break. If we show downward movement like we have so many times when we see these type of candlesticks, I think it could be a potential selling opportunity if you're on the bearish side of the dollar. Certainly, potentially, we have a head and shoulders pattern forming. Now, it's just potential right now, but we do have that potential left shoulder, head, and right shoulder developing. Big deal at resistance. And at least for today, I'm not a huge fan of it trying and failing. That generally does not have a great track record of, it can push right through tomorrow, but that's not a ton of strength. I like my breaks to be clean. Break through, no questions asked, get everybody on the same page. Not what we saw today in the dollar as we hang around at resistance. We just see a little bit of a rally on gold today, briefly pushed above its 50-day moving average, didn't make it all the way to the 1220 as we got closer and closer. We did see some profit taking come in. Nothing really has changed in my opinion with the gold. That 1220 is still the number that you're looking at, whether that's where you want to go short or if you're looking for a break. That 1220 is where we've been playing. That's where the action's been on gold, and that's what I will continue to monitor. I'd love to see it take another run at it, though. Maybe we get a selling opportunity. Maybe we get a breakout. So the closer, and hey, at least it's some interesting. At least we saw some movement, right? Most days gold is far more boring than it was today. Silver pushed up and ran through that 50 today, only to run into that previous resistance, which is pretty strong at about $15, and then get basically slapped back down. Still closed positive for the day. Test one of resistance, though, definitely was a failure from a technical point of view. I know a lot of people are saying that silver could be a technical entry above 15, and I would agree with that. I still maintain I don't trust silver. I'll just wait for a gold break if that's what happens. I just don't trust it. Again, I'm wrong, and I'm be the first to admit to say I should have trusted it. But again, you have to be comfortable with what you're trading. We've identified that there was some bullish opportunity, right, as it broke out last week. Hopefully some people trusted it and made some money. I wasn't one of them, sadly. So that's okay. Can't trade everything. Watch that 15 resistance. That's certainly day one, certainly a defeat. And we know that that was, a pretty big deal before. Plus, it's a nice round number, which tends to matter quite often. As we look at natural gas, we continue to remain very bullish, continue to remain very strong over in the natural gas market. Breakout continues. Really nothing to say that we haven't said for a bit. It remains bullish. It's now above resistance. That breakout is clearly there. It's bullish. Whether or not you're trading it, waiting for a pullback or whatever, that's probably what's the determining factor in my mind. I don't see how you can make a bearish argument right now, at least, on natural gas. Breakout remains very, very strong. And then lastly, our old friends in crude sold off a little bit today as the profit takers came in off of yesterday's, obviously wonderful day for bulls. I think we can watch this previous breakout point as a potential turnaround point if we are bullish, but not in crude oil. I think that can be a place from a price point of view in the mid 74s where we start to look for some turnaround signals. Obviously, that would be a positive development regardless of whether I trade it or not, right? Pulling back to the breakout point, testing that as support and showing upward movement, that's a big deal, right? So whether or not we're doing anything with it, that will always remain a big deal. But really nothing too tremendous to see here. The break remains intact. If we're not here and we are looking for opportunities, I do think pulling back to the breakout point would be something I would be watching for. We'll have to see how she goes. Another solid day overall technically when it comes to crude. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where we find ourselves today on a little bit of a back and forth day in the market. It's not just every day, I don't think, where you see the Dow Jones hit a new all-time high while the Russell is just selling off like a maniac. So definitely kind of odd to the extremes. You see Russell go down while the Dow goes up. That stuff happens. But pretty extreme today, in my mind at least. But definitely some interesting things out there. With that, ladies and gentlemen, as always, it is my pleasure, and I do appreciate everybody's time. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit that notification bell if you haven't already to be alerted to any new videos that we're doing over here. We love to share them with you. Also, be sure to follow us over at Tackle Trading on Twitter to keep up with some of the things that we're doing and following over the course of each and every market day. If you enjoyed the market recap, it is always very helpful and appreciated if you do give it a thumbs up to let us know that we're on the right track. With that, get out of here. Happy trading, and I will see you in the next one.